first 5 minutes of our HPP session, we have some special guests from the Hildreth Insurance Agency. They are our long-term disability agents. We have a new policy for the residents who started July 1st, and that's been taken care of as part of onboarding and orientation. However, for those of you that have been here since before July 1st, you are able for a short period of time to make a transition to the new policy. The coverage is a little better. I won't take up any more time. I'll let John and Heath Hildreth explain. They're going to be out front as y'all leave today, and they have quotes and things for you. Okay? Please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm John Hildreth. This is Heath Hildreth. And just to tell you, just quite simply, we were fortunate enough to be the new providers of your disability insurance, like Pam said. And to tell you the truth, I think the main reason that we received this business is because for the first time ever, you now have own occupational specialty coverage. You've never had that before with the previous carriers. And so we have got, like you said, we've got proposals for everybody. I have quite a few people from my office here. Patty Ball's here from Ohio National. And you've received several emails. I know Pam has sent some emails, and we have too. But what we have right now is an open enrollment period. This is actually up to December the 1st. At this time, you can switch from your current disability policy to Ohio National. And the interesting thing, we've looked at all this, and about almost 80% of you would either save money or you'd be within $1 a month of the premium to switch to the Ohio National, and you would have the ONOC and also a $15,000 a month guaranteed additional non-medical purchase. So I can talk to you more about different things about the policy out here, but I don't want to keep you on any more of the information right now. Any questions at all for us?
So what we have out there is just your personalized form. So you see us, and we'll pull that for you. And what will happen is we have an application. It takes less than 5 minutes to fill out, super quick. So if you want to knock it out while we're here today, that's great. We can help you with that. Once you turn in the application, we would be taking care of everything with the transition of replacing the Unum coverage, making sure you come off of that payroll deduction, and that policy goes away, so you don't have to go track down the Unum folks. We'll take it from there. Policies would be effective January 1st, and it would be seamless where you wouldn't have a gap in coverage between the Unum and the Ohio National. So, again, we can answer more of those questions outside, so please come see us afterwards, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes. All right. And if y'all ever take advice from an old fart, pay attention to what they have to offer. You never know when you're going to need it, and so take a moment and see what they have to offer. It's a pleasure to be here and provide y'all with a little bit, and this is a tiny snapshot, but hopefully it excites y'all a little bit about how you can play doctor outside of the world of patient care. Think about the broader system of care that we all work and live in, and empower you to make a difference. So we're going to do a brief introduction to the concept of lean, and also help think about how we do diagnostics and treatment plans when we identify problems within systems, and we use a PDCA or PDSA cycle for that. So I'm Jeff Bennett. I'm a pediatrician, pediatric hospitalist with a background in Lean Six Sigma as applied to healthcare. And we also have Sonia Reed, who has 2 decades, I think, of healthcare quality improvement experience to share the toolkit around PDCA. Can everybody hear me all right? I'm hoping the folks out in Murphy can. We're being streamed to other sites, and there are people who are logged in, so I'm hoping everybody can hear me. If you guys catch me starting to wander around, tell me to get back in front of this microphone, because that will screw up the whole thing. So lean, generally speaking, you're going to see some keywords again and again in sentences that describe lean. One of them is waste. So the attempt to identify and eliminate waste from the processes that we rely on to provide services for patients. And also think about it, all the things that you need to go right to be able to supply those services to patients. We have the word value that crops up. What is it that the customer is interested in, needs, wants, would actually pay for? Those are all important concepts. Standardization. Once you stumble across what works, how do you make sure that that spreads, that everyone's using the one best way? Those are general concepts that Lean and other ways of approaching system-level quality try to focus on how to make that occur. The customer is everybody. The ultimate customer may be our patient, but you guys are all customers too, and you're all suppliers. We all play roles in complex processes. There's someone who's depending on us doing it well, doing it fast, and doing it right. And so we all depend on that ourselves. So this is all interconnected. It's no less complex than your human body. One thing breaks down, it can have a ripple effect across everything else. It's nothing new. Systems all over the country are embracing this concept, some of them more robustly than others. But the point being is that this is not something that is going to be, wow, I've never heard of Lean, out in the world that you guys will be going into once you finish your residency. It's taking off, and this is probably an incomplete list of systems that are currently embracing this general set of concepts. So there's a number of success stories, and this could be 50 to 100 slides. I'd bore you to death with how this can work. And you may have had experiences yourselves where you noticed a waste, or someone that you work with noticed a waste, a problem, a defect, and they did a little bit of work, reworked the process, and now it's better for everybody. You're beneficiaries of that with some of the EPIC upgrades, which basically are derived from lessons learned and applying new process models to the work that you do. So these are some things that really focus on benefit to customers, right? If you can increase the time you spend face-to-face with your patient, they have a better experience and you tend to provide better care with fewer glitches. If you have an opportunity to reduce radiation and improve productivity by streamlining the services that you receive in imaging patients, that's a pretty good thing. Reducing the cycle time in a pediatric clinic so that working families don't have to spend so many hours away from work and having to make up for that. And then, of course, patients getting the care that they want with limited delay so they don't feel tempted to leave. Those are all pretty powerful things to do. Lean is mostly a set of principles that are supported by tools. Okay? So I don't want anyone to leave the room thinking that Lean is a collection of tools. It really is a set of principles. And those principles rely on a mindset as well as the execution of certain problem-solving skills. Those tools help you do that. This is no different than walking into a room and executing an H&P. Same concept, right? You can't just go do that nilly-willy. There's a process. Same thing for Lean. It's simply a function of how do you approach problem-solving. How do you go see, find out what's truly happening before you start throwing a diagnosis and a plan at it. Make sense? So the purpose, customer-centered, customer-focused. Remember, we're all customers in this, with the patient being our ultimate customer. We design our care around our customer, okay? Our ultimate customer, and then iteratively, our direct customer. People. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to engage people who don't feel supported, respected, and who don't feel valued? You can't do this unless you promote that and, to be honest, unless you feel it yourselves. So wherein that doesn't exist, that's an important conversation to have. Respect for people is fundamental to this whole mindset. If you respect people, you develop them, and you also try to utilize all of their talents. You never put someone in a role they're unprepared for, and you certainly don't put people in roles that they're over-prepared for. All right? The idea is that you're using people's skills and talents to the utmost. People feel that as a sense of respect. Process. This is the best way to avoid the blame game. Whatever happened, in whoever's hands it happened, 99 times out of 100, it had to do with something that person did not control. But since that person was in this cockpit at the time it occurred, it is a natural and obvious thing to consider that it was their fault. It takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of calm to approach that and say, what were the conditions? What did you notice? Are you okay? Those are the kinds of things that you're not only respecting the person, but you're opening the opportunity for discovery. The processes, the systems that surrounded that event are almost always the source of the defect that led to whatever outcome you'd rather not see. Waste reduction is simply a way of getting the rocks out of your shoes. Those of you on call take long journeys every single time you're on call. Imagine dropping a pebble in your shoe and doing that all day long. Many of our systems are built exactly like that. You guys are walking around many days with rocks in your shoes. And you may be putting rocks in other people's shoes that you're not even aware of. Time is one of the ways we feel that we're being served. How long did it take? And that influences our sense of being really a priority. It also our sense of quality. So reducing the time it takes to go from a need to a fulfillment is a key aspect of process improvement. And you need to be able to solve problems. So you guys are here as learners to basically develop the skill set it takes to solve problems. This is why you came to healthcare. So this is one of the key elements of lean application that I think you guys are already very, very capable of. This is something I stumbled across a couple of days ago. This is what appeared on our Children's 300 huddle board. The note reads, please check O2 tanks when placing back in storage room. Never place an empty tank in the full tank stand. Seems simple, right? Somehow, some way, someone put an empty tank where it didn't belong. And by golly, we're going to call that out. Now let's take a look at the tank stand. So this is what you would see. And if you look really closely, you've got three versions of this. You've got a full, not full, partial, and not full, empty label. Little interesting, right? Already we've got two not fulls. Turns out those are the full tanks. Okay? So where do the full ones go? Well, they go anywhere. But the empty ones certainly can only go one place. That's what you know right now. Which one should the nurse take next if they're transporting a patient to X-ray who needs oxygen? Should they automatically grab a full one? Should they grab a partial full one? What's the rule? How many are we actually supposed to have? There's actually a regulation about this. We can only have so much explosive stuff on the floor. And this is probably exceeding our regulated limit. You think there's some problems here? Do we have a diagnosis? Or is this just symptoms? So processes basically are embedded in what we call value streams. Remember, the whole emphasis is value as described by the customer, right? So at one end you have a need, a request, an order that may come in as a chief complaint. And at the other end, you have what is hopefully a functional solution. And yes, there's a payment. Now this is true for ordering cars. This is true for just about anything that is in the economy. But the value stream is basically a description of all the work that goes into getting to that solution that the customer desires. And it can cost as much as it costs. And it's only as good as how well it meets the customer's needs. So if you think about it from that end, it has nothing to do with personalities. It has to do with being able to do the work in the best way with the least waste. So a functional stream would take that order, process it into different materials that are then used by the next step, and ultimately you get to what you have. And if it goes well, then you get the most out of it. So that's a process that's functional. Now let's throw somebody on the bus. Let's say you've got the new intern on service. Okay? And that new intern is assigned a task, say ordering a drug on rounds, and is in the computer and fires away and enters what they thought they heard. And that order goes somewhere, right? Where does that go? Pharmacy. That goes to pharmacy. So pharmacy takes a look at that and says, And now pharmacy is going to do what? They're going to circle back, right? And they're going to try to rework that with whatever time it takes and pulling them away from whatever other value-adding tasks that they were doing to make sure that that's converted to the desired order. And then they go through the fulfillment process. But that's been disruptive. Now, the customer ultimately got what they needed, but the effort it took to get there drew down the value. It drew down that resource, and it affected other things that were flowing through the pharmacy value stream. Was the intern a bad intern? Oh. You guys are hard, man. So think about that process and where in that process that could have been seen before it went further down the chain. You know, could it have been reviewed before send was hit or before the order was signed? Possibly. Could there have been a verbal clarification before the order was even placed? Possibly. So there are a lot of things that could have been done that would have prevented that from going downstream, and that intern wouldn't have been at risk of committing that error and maybe getting blamed for it. All right, we're not going to pick on interns anymore. Let's pick on the patient. Complex patient, mom cares for this patient up and down, but sadly, mom is overseas, and said patient got sick, so you're stuck with dad. And dad has a version of the history to supply. Dad passes that history on, and it's taken pretty much down the whole value stream as being true. And then mom gets back to town. And mom says, nuh-uh, do over, start again. This ain't right. And you get to replay 3/4 of that experience in order to get things appropriately built. Bad juju. Okay, lab. Let's throw like a lab drawing system under the bus. Let's say there's a situation where the last time this particular individual who drew blood was chewed out because they didn't get all the tubes that was needed. And so their countermeasure is to always draw the extra tubes, whether they're ordered or not. They're not going to get chewed out again. Now, everything flows downstream that's needed, but now there's a lot of stuff that wasn't needed that's been procured. And that still has to be managed. Labs often store these things indefinitely, or at least for a period of time. So there's costs that come with any of those things, and those things are unnecessary. So those are real-world examples. This could truly happen. I drew all of these examples from actual real-life experiences. Okay? So defining value is really about the customer and what they would desire and be willing to pay for. Defining value is really in an activity, is that activity has to be transformative. It has to move whatever it is in the direction that meets that customer's need. Okay? If you're just spinning in place, you're not creating value. You may be working hard, but you're not creating value. If you think about that activity, then not only do you want it to be moving forward, you want it done right the first time, every time. So it's really about quality at the source. It's never passing on a defect to the downstream. That's honestly where you get the highest representation of quality in any process you work in. So that attention and that ability to cross-check when you're uncertain, to be safe, to say, I'm not sure, can you help me, can you look at this, is important to all of us. We are very fallible creatures, and this is a very complicated world. So if you have to sort out processes to understand what's good and what's not, you really have to be able to define value. And basically, it's broken into 3 categories. Value added, yes, we're moving the product forward in the desired way. Not necessarily value added, but we can't get rid of it. So the whole process around billing is not value added. The customer neither desires it, nor would they want to pay for it. But it's necessary for our business to stay afloat. So we do a lot of work to capture the information we need in order to create and send a bill on so we get paid. We can't get rid of it. It's essential, but it's not value added. And then there's waste, the things that clearly require effort and resource but aren't doing any good for the customer in the long run. This can be broken down into a number of categories. I'm not going to belabor this. This is the sort of thing that if I tell you all of it, you're going to remember it for 20 minutes, and then you're not going to remember it later. But I invite you to kind of look through this downtime mnemonic as it relates to lean, and you'll find this anywhere on the internet. But it helps you see that, defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, which means your skills and expertise, and us not asking you for your input. Transportation, moving things around unnecessarily. Inventory, keeping stuff on hand that you don't need, or not having the stuff you do need on hand. Motion, basically, you're twisting this way and that, and you're grabbing this and all of this in order to get a job done, going 6 different directions. Extra processing, you've got the same information going into 20 forms, only 3 of which are used. Okay? So the first name of the game, when you feel frustration, that's the F word in healthcare, it's frustration. Now, it comes out in other expletives, but it's frustration, okay? And if you feel frustration, you know there's waste. If your customer says they're frustrated, in whatever way they say it, there's waste. That is the human experience of waste. So now you have to say, where is it? How did this come to frustrate you? Me, the customer for this process, the ultimate customer or patient. So this is a brief story. This is mom coming in, April, checks in, 4-year-old well-child check in the clinic. I'm a pediatrician, remember, so you're just going to have to bear with me. Original appointment was canceled because the doctor's vacation kind of abruptly landed on their week to see this child. Registrar says she arrived an hour late. Mom thought the appointment was 9:30, but no, it actually was also switched to an 8:30 appointment, and Mom was unaware of that. 20 minutes pass while they check in with the doc, see if the doc will see the patient. So they do say, yeah, you're lucky. She's willing to see you. Registration steps, find that the insurance changed since the last visit, so they go through the process of fixing all of that. It takes 10 more minutes for the registration to finish, and then they're asked to wait for the person who's going to actually bring them back. 15 minutes later, the MA comes back and walks them through the whole process, which involves going down a couple of different corridors to do different tests, and ultimately putting them into an exam room. And along the way, the MA, who is, by the way, kind of double working right now because of the way things worked out with this patient landing in the schedule, is a little frustrated and lets it slip that it's really important to be on time for their appointment. 10 minutes pass, and the physician enters the room, performs all of the necessary care, enters the orders for vaccinations, tells mom to make an appointment for a 5-year assessment, spends 13 minutes of value-added time with the family. Mom forgot to ask 2 questions that were important to her because by now she's starting to worry about being able to pick up her other child. 15 minutes later, the LPN comes in with the immunizations but apologizes for the wait because had to take extra time to get the vaccine information sheets printed because they were out, and then the printer was out of paper and they had to go back to the stock room, which is at the other end of the clinic, to load the paper in the stock, and mentions that he's not really sure why they haven't taken him up on his suggestion to put the extra paper near the printer. That night, after tucking her children in bed, the physician is documenting all of this in the medical record and notes that the vaccine expiration date that was plugged in is actually an expired vaccine. So very frustrated, calls the family, does the right thing, tells them that they're going to have to come back for a revaccination for it to count, fires off an email to the administrator, kind of chewing her out for letting that happen, and in the process forgets to document the presence of lymphadenopathy. How many different kinds of waste do you think occurred in that one clinic visit? How many people were frustrated? How much effort would it take to chip away at some of these challenges and problems? There's some low-hanging fruit in this, right? You don't have to fix it all at once. We don't boil oceans, all right? We say, golly, we could fix that today. We could move some paper near the printer, couldn't we? Right now. Easy fix. There's probably a handful of other things that with a little bit of effort could make tomorrow better than today. So that's the notion. All right. So before I pass the baton, generally speaking, if you're kind of feeling all that frustration in your everyday life and you're running into this waste all the time, you know, you can certainly take the despairing path of saying, okay, that's just life, that's how it is. I'm only going to be here for a little while. Move on to a new place with all of its problems. Or maybe there's an opportunity for us to chip away at some of these things that are, you know, rocks in people's shoes, and we can leave the place better than we find it. So let's pass on to PDSA.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Bennett. So this is actually a perfect tie-in to the example that Dr. Bennett just had. So when he was talking about some things that you can do to make some changes, and this will be a perfect example to use PDSA. So we'll talk about this. Many of you are familiar with PDSA with projects that you're doing. So this will be a refresher for you. For those that are not familiar with the concept, it'll be an introduction. The PDSA, and I apologize, so the reason that I keep getting stuck, you hear PDCA or PDSA. They're used interchangeably, so I'll try to say PDSA. Gives us a way to quickly test changes on a small scale, observe what happens, tweak the changes as necessary, and then test again. So not to Dr. Bennett's point, not trying to boil the ocean. Let's make some small changes, see the results, and then we'll plan another PDSA cycle and continue to improve. So the first phase of the PDSA cycle is plan. So plan the test, including a plan for collecting the data. So what's your objective? What are you trying to accomplish? The questions that you want to answer, as well as making predictions on what you expect to see, and then develop a plan for that change. Who will be involved? What are you testing? When would you like to start this trial? Where, which unit, which department, and what data do you need? In the do phase, we try the test on a small scale. So you carry out the test, document the problems and unexpected observations, and that's very important because you have a goal. But if there are things that you didn't expect during your test, document those as well. That's valuable information, and we'll talk about that a little later. And then you begin to analyze the data. In the study phase, analyze the data and study the results. So complete your analysis, and you can use various tools for your data analysis. We don't talk about it in this lecture. It might be something, a potential for a future lecture, or you can reach out to Dr. Bennett or one of your attendings or the PI team if you need help analyzing your data. So you complete your analysis of the data, you compare the data to the predictions that you had, and you summarize and reflect on what you've learned. So that's really important because that leads you to the act phase where you refine your test. You refine the next cycle based on what you learn. So what modifications do you need to make? And then preparing that next PDSA. And so this is just a graphical display of the PDSA cycle. And I love this because, again, it ties into not trying to boil the ocean, testing a small change, seeing improvements, learning from that test, and then doing another PDSA cycle, and continuing that and improving the process overall. And if you continue that cycle and you look back, that huge problem that you were trying to solve, you will see that you have made a large dent in that opportunity, but you have to take it in small steps so that you're not overwhelmed. So this is a quick example, a healthcare example of a PDSA. So you start off with your aim statement. So it has to be a SMART aim statement, so specific, measurable, attainable. It relates to the issue at hand, and it has to be time-bound. So they did this in this statement. By June 2017, increase the number of follow-up PCP visits scheduled for stroke patients prior to discharge from 50 to 70%. So they were specific. This is what we want to achieve. They said we want to do it by June 2017, so it was time-bound. So for this cycle, their test of change was a follow-up appointment will be made and noted in the chart. And then they went so far as to say who would be responsible for that. Also in the planning phase, they listed out the tasks that needed to be completed. So the scheduling of the appointment, developing training materials, et cetera. So that all occurs in the plan phase. And then remember, we're going to predict what will happen. So they predict that 10 consecutive patients will have a primary care appointment scheduled prior to discharge. And they'll do that through chart audits. In this example, so in the due phase, during the week, the health unit clerk scheduled the appointment. For discharges on the weekends, appointments were not scheduled. So they saw that the appointment was scheduled, but they also had an unexpected outcome that they recorded. In the study phase, describe the measured results and how they compare to the predictions. Case review, chart audits, and interviews found that for discharges during the week, the procedure worked well and the number of appointments scheduled increased. However, weekend patient discharges, the HUC did not see the order set for scheduling the appointment or forgot to document in the chart. So this was an unexpected observation that they recorded. So based on that, what are they going to change? So this is the ACT phase. The stroke coordinator will review the process for patients discharged on the weekends. If a patient's primary care provider is in the same health system, the ED nurse that conducts the 72 hours post-discharge follow-up phone call will make the appointment Monday morning if the patient has not already done so. So they are planning their next phase. So this is just a quick example of PDSA. It can also be applied to the example that Dr. Bennett had. You can apply it in your daily work as you're seeing opportunities, discussing with your team. Let's do a PDCA cycle and test this change and evaluate it, learn from it, and then test another. And of course, we always encourage you to share your results so that we can learn from your examples. Any questions? Anything to add, Dr. Bennett?
No, if you guys look at PDSA, does it look a bit like an HEP to you?
They probably can't hear you.
Oh, I forgot the rule. See, defect. Does this remind you of doing an H&P? You know, plan really comes around understanding the problem, kind of getting a better idea of what you're dealing with, right? It's making a diagnosis, right? That may involve a number of small cycles of iterative discovery. You get into doing, right? You're actually trying to implement a plan of care study, trying to see how that affects the outcome of interest. Act, you sustain or adjust that plan of care based on the outcome that you observed. This is all you're doing. This is basically iterative, the same way doing an H&P leads you to numerous progress notes, and your summary sort of describes that journey of discovery and how it impacted the patient. So this shouldn't be too new to anybody in terms of concept. It's just different in terms of construct. Hopefully the sort of thing that would be very easy for all of us to sort of embrace. The thing that doctors tend to do, and this is not just doctors, this is administrators, this is people who are accustomed to making decisions or having immediate influence, is they tend to jump to solutions before they understand the problem. Okay, and that's natural. We want to move on, and I know myself, I tend to want to just be the decider. I want it my way, and I have no idea how I'm affecting the system. So the ability to pause, ask some questions, better understand, share ideas, select something to try in a small-scale way that isn't going to blow up the whole system. Make sure it's a good solution before you spread it around. That just seems like a calmer and certainly more respectful approach. Now, it's not just doctors, like I said. There's a lot of folks in busy systems that are under pressure, who are feeling frustration, who will just want to throw their weight around. That happens. And you just got to kind of understand that, and maybe you can ask, hey, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And that's not a bad conversation starter. All right, that's all my comments on that. Anybody have experience? Raise your hands if you had any experience using PDSA or PDCA cycles. Raise them high. Raise them high. That's awesome. Have you coached anybody using a PDCA or PDSA cycle? Which is harder, doing it or teaching someone else? Can't hear you. Getting it done? Getting it done. We got a lot of doers here. How many of you in your PDSAs have failed? How many of you in your first assessment of the patient got it dead wrong? If anyone in this room has not raised their hand in that moment, you're lying to yourself or others. All right? We've all got it dead wrong. Okay? It's that ability to know I'm on the wrong path, I'm going to study, and I'm going to adjust that allows us to get back on a better track. This is very much what we do every day for a living. So it's amazing that we can actually apply that skill set and that way of thinking to the broader system that we all work in. And all we're talking about is doing that. All right. That's all we have for you today, I think, unless there's other questions or comments or storytelling that you'd like to share.
So if you want more resources, I don't know how many have heard about the IHI website and the tools. I see heads nodding, the tools that are available. So I encourage you to please go to that website. You'll see some of the slides that were presented today. So there are more resources for you. And as I understand it, that's the format that will be used for the projects and for Quality Day in May. So please use those resources. And if you have any questions, there are resources available to help you. For the PEDS residents, you can reach out to Dr. Bennett or your program director if you're in a different department. Okay. All right, so if there's anything else, I was looking for Pam. Maybe she stepped out. Okay. Well, then I believe you're dismissed. You get some time back. Have a good day.
Let's do the applause meter. Come on.